Here are some graphic novel slash comic book or manga, whatever the hell you want to consider it, stories that I have been working on recently, but they just kind of got nowhere. Not that I can't finish it, it's just that it seems not to really work, or sometimes I get into the writing stage, and then the drawing stage part of it is like, okay, trying to decide what these characters look like and stuff, and going through character concepts is a little bit tricky on something. Sometimes people have is the concept of the character or design first, then the story, or But I'm like going the with these stories is the story first, which they kind of evolved as time went on. Okay, this first story is more like of a rehash of older ideas and stories that I've written, in my youth. It's what you can say is a deconstruction of the superhero trope. Well, not just superheroes, but also supervillains. So it goes into separate arcs, or you know of things, and the titles have kind of changed over time. But basically, this is what it is. Um, the overarching story of each individual section has its own little arc, but the overall arc is about the rise of you know people with super abilities, being superheroes and supervillains and like that. So people with these kind of superhuman abilities, the rise of them, and the ultimate downfall of society in general, including is the rise and fall of a particular superhero nation. So it pretty much goes follows one particular character, of his story. It starts out with this young lad who is a teenager who ends up finding out that his body is changing, and he ends up with superhuman abilities. Basically, he is quote unquote Superman, more or less. That Superman character archetype. Except without being the goody two shoes of Superman, or the Superman that is a fucking dick during the golden age and silver age of comics. He's not any of those. He's not the Boy Scout Superman that we come to love and think that's what he is about, when he's not completely about that. This is like a Superman kind of character, um, that his powers come at rapid, but he doesn't have like heat vision or anything. He has super strength. He flies. He's also invincible in some ways. Weapons don't hurt him. Like blades will actually, crunched into it. Yeah. So, you see the old tropes where push the knife and the knife bends, folds up, can't do anything like that. Bullets bounce off of them or something, that shit. Well, that kind of thing. But it's not all specified all at once. It's these little things over time, and he tries to hide the fact that he has any kind of superhuman ability. So the first section, or the first book really, is about him coming to terms with this and trying to hide the fact, because his parents are very fearful about peoples with such powers, and the society in general, like the government, and with also within the media, puts these kind of people as vigilantes, or as criminals in some way, or like a crime against humanity and shit. Yeah. So it has a lot of context of the whole thing with racism and uh, gender identity, of euphemisms towards of those things. But this is all wrapped up within a superhero story. So, anyways, that's kind of the first thing. The first book is about this kid coming to terms with his abilities and what he's becoming. And also, he decides to take action, such as to be the hero. In his world, there is superhero comic books and stuff. There is this thing, but when that thing becomes a reality, people are fearful of it. They're envious and also hating upon it. And you'll see, like, throughout the story, is there are types of people that have these kind of abilities. They end up doing horrendous things. Some try to do good, others just want to do is live their lives as comfortably as possible. So, the next set of books is about, usually about this main character, but there are certain ones that will pertain about a different character. There is another character that his name kept on changing. This one is, in his story, pertains about pretty much what is going on in the U.S. today and stuff. So, this person who is quote unquote a vigilante, he does not fly, he doesn't have, laser eyes or any of that shit, no heat vision, no x-ray vision, none of that stuff. None of those other kind of powers. He just only has one particular superhuman ability. He's immortal. He cannot be harmed or killed, cannot die. He just aged to a certain point and can't age anymore. We don't know how old this guy is, how long this person has lived. This person goes after the goody two-shoes that only want fame of to be, oh, praise me for being a hero, or wanted to be a god character. Goes after them, these superhero and supervillain characters, but also goes after tyranny in a very violent way, because he believes that the only recourse is through violence, because these beings, no matter if they have powers or not, the only thing they can understand is more violence. So, violence begets violence, and that's what this character is about. And this character never calls themselves by any name of anything, just specifies that they are vengeance. You can consider them the hand of God. Yeah. So you got an invincible guy that can't die, and no matter who tries to stop him, the people with superhuman strength doesn't care. Here's the thing. This person knows how to actually fight. Different forms of martial arts. I'm not just talking about Eastern arts, just martial arts in general, of hand-to-hand combat, unarmed combat to armed combat as well, of using of different implements as tools of weapons of war and destruction, So, yeah, he can take down anybody, and he does. You can say, oh, he's a Mary Sue character, but he's not, because he's not really liked by anybody. He is declared a villain. He is very unlikable. It's supposed to be that this character is meant to be unliked, but I also understand that people are going to read about this character and see this character's actions thinking, that's a fucking badass character. Of course, I want this character to be badass, but to be hated by everyone within this story world. And then when you realize that in this world he lives in, he's not wrong. Although violence doesn't solve everything, but in this instance, he solves whole mess of problems by literally cutting the heads off of well of the actual problem. He just goes after those particular people. He just targets them. He doesn't care. Yeah, and he's not alone. You find out within his story there are others that have done the same. Some have died because they're not immortal and whatnot, or who have done was taking over a country and becoming the dictator that they were trying to destroy in the first place. So, somebody wipes out a dictator and becomes a dictator of their own, of their country and shit. Kind of insane, but yeah. But he does pop up later in other stories. I have is the rise and fall of this story. Well, actually, a couple stories, somewhat three stories. Been working on within this group of overarching storyline is the rise and fall of this um, superhuman city, or city state, I should say. So, anyways, the main character from the very beginning, the young boy, as the series goes on, it's supposed to take place over years as each volume's happening, different time period and whatnot as it's going on. And he gets older and stuff. So, what he ended up doing is becoming the hero that he wanted. Um, his family disowning him and stuff. His family was murdered, even though he tried everything he can to save the people that he loved, and they were in fear of him and hating him because of his abilities. Could not accept him for who he was. So, instead of like taking over a nation or whatever, he does is unites his peoples, basically, people with superhuman abilities like himself that want to join, and they create a new city state where they had was autonomy unto themselves, to be left alone, and will accept anybody. Doesn't matter what, of what religion or gender or cultural background or national history or whatever, wherever they came from, they can go to there and live in peace and find work and whatever, have a home and a place where they can be free from the tyranny of the rest of the world, and especially the hatred. They can avoid that, where they can be included and have an inclusive life. Of course, there are going to be beings that, with this in this storyline of with superhero powers, that are very racist and homophobic and stuff. Just how it is. I'm just only writing about people that of that type that exist in the real world. So the good, the bad, and the ugly of our world societies in this story. Um, I thought of the name for this storyline to be called as The New Gods. You know, I know that does exist as a title, but it's going to have my name of, um, you know, my version of The New Gods. Not how to do with the other books, whatever. But yeah. So these superhuman beings become like the new age gods. And you find out within the story arc that the old gods did exist. It's not like they're supernatural, but they're beings that have been misunderstood or misrepresented that survived, that had superhuman abilities. All these wacky things, and a lot of the things were just over embellished over time and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of what it comes on to. And there were characters that are claiming to be ancient gods until you find out that they're not. Or some of them is like, you're not really sure. Are they really telling the truth, or are they delusional? What is the case? I want it to be as ambiguous as possible with a lot of these characters, but certain ones is going to be a definitive, but there's still that lingering of doubt of like, did what they say was absolutely true? So yeah, it's kind of a weird take on superhero story. The superhero, supervillain, archetypes and stuff of those story types. But putting in a more human face onto it, to having real emotions, to having, this outlook of altruism, but finding out that it's a facade. Then I have is another story that I was off and on working on. A lot of it is based off of other ideas I had in the past. This one doesn't have a title. It's a graphic novel or in a manga style, Japanese style, design. This story, or well, it's just one big ass book if you really think about it. I still haven't figured out a title for it. So, anyways, bear in mind, I'm trying to, rearrange my thoughts to get it in order to make it coherent for me to tell you what it is. So, this other story is not what you think it is. I'm making it kind of ambiguous in some degree. Yeah, I know a lot of my tales kind of being ambiguous to where it's like, okay, you're wondering, is this real or is it not? Is this a fantasy or what is it? Of as this takes place. So this story is a hive of fantasy tale, like Lord of the Rings, except it's also within more sci-fi elements, and also this next is also with steampunk. So like kind of thinking high fantasy medieval style mixed with steampunk design from the Victorian era look, of that, but also the crazy sci-fi technologies and marvels and stuff. So closely to resemble it would be, I would say, is like Dot Hack GU, those three video games, or you could say Dot Hack Roots, which is the anime series for it. That whole entire look is the most equivalent to it. That fantasy look, of magic, might and magic kind of thing, and stuff, and steampunk elements. That's kind of the look and all of that. But I haven't really made it fully coherent into one narrative. of this story. What it is a hero's journey tale of the story archetype. So it's not following one character, it's following a group of heroes or adventurers, really, in this particular world where, well, it's kind of like a slice of life kind of thing, as if that you were living in one of those fantasy games or whatever, like Zelda uh, um, or Final Fantasy, except what these characters would do like on a day to day basis and stuff. So it's kind of like a weird slice of life in some ways, uh, but it's also a hero's journey. So moving the characters forward through the story and hitting all of these archetype beats, not architectural, but archetyped beats of a story. So you would have the highs and falls, but basically there's going to be conflict within the group itself, the group dynamics of their beliefs. Like I said, it's not fully complete. I'm still working on it, and even my tales that I had did that all kind of connect together, but they're all discombobulated in a way, trying to make them mesh. And it's hard to try to express about what it is. So, yeah, this is a story that is not finished in any way. That is not fully coherent enough to be a story, but yeah, the main characters, of this group, they set forth upon their journey and they basically try to save the day. And they end up failing, but sometimes they succeed. Sometimes they think that they failed miserably, and even though that they believe that they failed at this one task to do some good, and not realizing that they have, because they did not find out. The reader gets to find out a lot of the things that the main characters don't. And none of these characters are Mary Sue characters whatsoever. They're just like a combination of different types of character tropes and stuff mashed together and reforged to be individual beings with their own dreams and goals and hopes and aspirations and all that, and their loves and desires and hatreds and their misery and whatnot. And some of it has gone into existential dread. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Yeah. Those are like all the tales that I have been working on. The New Gods series, I don't know when I'm going to fully complete it, but I have written several of these books and, fully finished, but never published them, by the way. None of these are published. But, yeah. These are just some of my random ideas and ramblings, and also telling you of some of the stuff that I have written. I wanted to express every aspect within this video about these things, these stories, except I don't want to give away too much, because if I do, I end up telling the whole entire story. I want there to be some mystery for you. Yeah. Oh, and on a side note, like the Dot Hack, series, like especially with in like the games and especially the comics and animes and stuff like that, including animated films. Always wanted to do was create a game an MMORPG very similar to that. Not exactly like it, but very similar in vein. But have like these hidden things inside the game, like um, things that are not known by the devs or you know like anyone that's part of the dev department to work on the bug fixes and shit like this over the games after it was created and whatever. They're just fixing or updating things and whatnot. These hidden mysteries that was in dot hack, about the world, like the first version of the game, where these parts of the original code is still within of the newer iterations of it. All they did was slap some new shit on top of the old, architecture, of the game. So there would be like these hidden gems and stuff, these uh, like these mystery things, of aura and all this, and these forgotten, lands and stuff. I want it to be kind of like that within the game, where people end up discovering these things, and it ends up being this organic mystery that people are creating, where they have to actually actively try to figure out. I always want to do that. And if I had any ability, well, actually, I have the abilities to do it. It's more of economic ability. So I don't have the funding to create said game the way I want it, of this kind of monstrosity of an MMO that will encompass so many different aspects. Of course, there would be like the whole fighting aspect, gameplay, but I would also have is other little things where you could own property and have a farm and stuff. So people that want to do farming, but farming wouldn't be like the main aspect, just like all these different kinds of games. I wanted to have these other little things so people could feel like the world is more alive, that they can try something else within this game world, where let's say they get tired of hunting, of going after the monsters, but they want to have a nice home, or they want to decorate their whole life, or have like a huge storage, for all of their collection, or to have a showcase of their you know, their trophies and their equipment and stuff, stuff like that. It's just some added stuff, and plus also have a shop, but having the shop, that the storefront for the game would only be just cosmetic stuff, plus other items, but it's not really meant as a pay to win. I might do is like, if I did do this, I would have certain things like brand new items that are just meant for the store would show up, because I didn't have it implemented for like a certain event, that it would just be an item in a shop that you could purchase for real, whatever, for not real being physical items, but just digital items for your character. Not all of it would be like cosmetic, but also items that would be vehicles or whatever, any kind of mode of transport to get you to point A to point B faster or whatever. Different aspects, why not? And also equipment, weapons and armor and shit like that. And accessories, why not? That buffs up your stats. Yeah. And a lot of it was designed on the idea for link gameplay, where, or if you just had the money and you were just a newbie character, or do you just create a brand new character just to F around with, so you get all these really high powerful items that you bought out of the store and stuff to deck them out? Then just like, okay, let's see how powerful or how fast I can go through the whole entire thing, mow down everything with this level 1 character. This kind of nonsense. Because I thought, like, okay, yeah, why not? Yeah. Oh.